Good morning, students. Welcome to the lecture of Real Analysis 2. In the last lecture, we have started a concept of finding a non-measurable set. For non-measurable, in order to find that non-measurable set, we have seen some basic definitions. The first definition we have studied is sum modulo 1. Sum modulo 1. Sum modulo 1 is a specific or special type of addition or summation denoted by x plus over a dot y, and it is defined as x sum modulo 1 is ordinary sum if x plus y is less than 1, and this is equal to x plus y minus 1 if the sum is greater or equal to 1. The reason behind defining the sum modulo 1 in like this manner is just to make it as a binary operation. Okay, because whenever I consider the interval of the type closed 0 to open 1, and for any two elements xy in the same interval, the maximum sum would be possible is 2. Correct na? Less than 2 rather one can say, because it is open one. If it is less than 2, if I subtract the number 1 from that, the value is going to be less than 1 and it will be a member of the same interval. Therefore, the reason behind taking this minus 1 is just to make this a sum modulo 1 a binary operation. Okay. Therefore, this is a binary operation, and we have seen that this is a commutative operation and also the associative. The next definition we have seen is translation modulo 1 of the given set E. As we have seen, the translation of any set E added with a vector or a scalar say y, we have defined this to be x plus y for all x in E. That is, we have added an element y to every element of set E. We have added the scalar y to every element of the set E on the parallel lines. The translation modulo 1 of the set E is denoted by E sum modulo 1 with y, and it is defined on the parallel lines x sum modulo 1 with y, that is x is in E. This is what the two definitions, and with the help of this definition, for any set E to be the subset of this closed 0 open 1 for a measurable set, we have proved that the Lebesgue measure is invariant under translation modulo. That is, we have proved that the set E translation modulo 1 with y is measurable, and measures of both the sets E and E translation modulo 1 are equal. To give the proof of this, we have divided E into two parts by making the two parts of this closed 0 open 1 interval like this: closed 0 open 1 minus y to closed 1 minus y to open 1. We have denoted by E1 and E2. Okay, then we have found measure of E is measure of E1 and measure of E2. We have found the value of E1 E1 sum modulo 1 with y as E1 plus y. E2 sum modulo 1 with y is E2 plus y minus 1. Therefore, we have obtained E1, E2 measurable set. Therefore, the corresponding translations are also measurable, and we have found the value of measure of E1 sum modulo 1 with y is measure of E1. Measure of E2 sum modulo 1 with y is measure of E2. But we want this value actually, E sum modulo 1 with y, and we have written this to be the union of these two sets where both are measurable. Therefore, we got E sum modulo 1 with y is measurable, and also we have proved a measure of E sum modulo 1 with y is measure of E. Therefore, Lebesgue measure is invariant under translation modulo 1. This is the first lemma we have proved. Next, we have started the proof of the theorem. There exists a non-measurable set in closed 0 to open 1. For this, we were going to make use of the equivalence relation, and the property of equivalence relation also, that it gives us the partition, rather a pairwise disjoint partition of the given set A. Okay, therefore we have initially defined one relation, this denoted with this symbol x related with y, and it is defined to be x is related with y if and only if x minus y is a rational number. One by one we have checked out that this relation is reflexive, symmetric and transitive as well. Therefore, this becomes an equivalence relation on the set closed 0 to open 1. Okay. Now, what the job we have done, we have made the partition of this interval closed 0 to 1 into disjoint equivalence classes. And we know all these classes are pairwise disjoint. Therefore, the set P we were going to select to be one element exactly from each equivalence class. Okay. In the set P, we were going to take one element from each equivalence class, and the aim is actually to show that the set P is a non-measurable set. Let us continue the proof in today's lecture. Okay. Now to show that this set P is a non-measurable set, now what we were going to define? We were going to define the translation of the set P by adding the rational numbers. Why rational numbers we were adding? Because the relation we have defined, this relation x related with y, the relation x related with y, we know it is defined to be x minus y is a rational number. X minus y is a rational number. Therefore, by using the sequence of rational numbers, we were going to define the translation of the set P. Okay, let me write. Let Ri be a sequence of rational numbers. What is I running from? Let me write I running from 0 to infinity specifically. Why I am taking 0? Because I wanted to include 0 as a rational number, rather it's a first rational number. Okay. Be a sequence of all rational numbers. Whether negative rational number will come in this? Sequence of all rational numbers in the closed 0 to open 1 with are not equal to 0. Okay, students, what is the question? Ri be the sequence we are taking from this interval. Whether this Ri will take a negative rational number is the question.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. It is not, because we want this to be in this interval, and this interval starts with 0. Therefore, here one can say or one can claim that r not equals to 0 be the first rational number under the consideration. Okay. Now we were going to define the translation of the set P by adding Ri or translation by sum modulo 1. Okay. Therefore, I am going to define a set. Let me denote it by Pi, and Pi we are going to denote P sum modulo 1 with Ri. Okay, that is, if we take I equal to 0, this number will be R0. R0 is 0. Therefore, for I equals to 0, what is the set we were getting? Is it the same set P?
Yes, ma'am.
P0 will be P sum modulo 1 with R0. But this R0 itself is 0, therefore this gives us P itself. What will happen for next rational number? Suppose the next rational is, for the sake of our understanding, say it is R1. Then this is P plus R1. Okay, P sum modulo 1 with R1. Therefore, P1 is P sum modulo 1 with R1. Like this we were going to define. P1 is P sum modulo 1 with R1. What is P2? P2 is P sum modulo 1 with R2 and continue. Is it okay? This is what the translation of the set P. These are the translation we were considering. Okay. Now the next job is we will try to find out, is there any element is in the intersection of these sets? Okay. Is there any element in the intersection of Pi and Pj? Say Pi and Pj be any arbitrary translation. Therefore, we were going to check whether any element in the intersection, and our aim is to show that there is no element in the intersection. Okay, next, if X is the element in the intersection Pi and Pj, no doubt I not equals to J. What is P actually? P is the collection of all elements from one equivalence class, right? These are the equivalence classes. P I am going to define to be one element from each equivalence class. The notation I have written here is say R1 for A1, A2, A3 and so on. This is the P set. Now we are going to find the translations of this set P. How the translations is found? The translation is found by sum modulo 1 with a rational number. Sum modulo 1 with a rational number Pi. And as we know, as every element is taken from each equivalence classes, that is disjoint equivalence classes. Now our aim is to show that whatever the translations we have obtained, those translations are also pairwise disjoint. For this, we have taken one element in the intersection, and we were going to show that this intersection is empty. That is, there is the translations which we have found are the pairwise disjoint translations, right? Okay, if I take the element in the intersection, therefore can I write x is in pi and x is in pj? It has to be present in both the sets, pi and pj. But what is pi we have defined? Pi we have defined p sum modulo 1 with ri. And what is pj then? P sum modulo 1 with
1
rj.
RJ.
Where? What about ri and rj? What is the nature? Rational number, no?
Yes, ma'am.
These are the rational numbers. Now, if x belongs to this set P sum modulo 1 with Ri, let me write this to be x, that is x is equal to some element say Pi of the set P added with or sum modulo 1 with Ri. And similarly, let me write the element in the second set to be x equal to some element Pj sum modulo 1 with Rj. Okay, therefore x we have found, the same element x we have found in two different forms. Therefore, let me equate both the forms, which gives us pi sum modulo 1 with ri equal to pj sum modulo 1 with rj. Is that clear? Now, as both the elements are equal, the difference must be 0. Therefore, can I write this as pi plus sum modulo 1 with ri minus pj sum modulo 1 with rj equal to 0. Okay. The point clear to everyone? Therefore, here,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
I write this as pi minus pj equal to rj minus ri. This sum works as an ordinary sum we know, but with the help of different values. Ri is equals to, how it is, let me check. How you are going to make this sum pi minus pj equals to rj minus ri is equal to say r, somewhere it is some r. Okay, this is one case if it is defined to be an ordinary addition, or in case of second addition, may I say this is rj minus ri plus minus
Minus
1,
1.
which is rational number, which is a rational number. Therefore, here we were getting pi minus pj once it is the difference of rational numbers, or according to the definition, this is pi minus pj. Again, this is a rational number. Therefore, according to the relation, may I say both the elements pi pj are related to one another. That is, pi is related to pj. Correct? Pi related to pj. But pi, pj are the elements we have taken from different equivalence classes. And if I get these two to be equivalent to one another, what will be the conclusion? See, these are the disjoint equivalence classes, no? Capital Pi and capital Pj. This is one element small pi we have taken. This is one element small pj we have taken, right? But now we were getting these two are related to one another. These two are related to one another. Actually, whenever the two elements are common in two equivalence classes, we have seen this initially, no? Suppose there are two
Then
equivalence
they are equal.
classes. Yes, they are equal or purely disjoint. No, but here, whether the possibility holds that they are equal. No, because we have taken this to be disjoint equivalence classes, and the set P we have defined by choosing one element from each equivalence classes, and we know each equivalence classes are disjoint classes. Therefore, the possibility both the equivalence classes are same is not possible. Then what is the possibility? Intersection is
Intersection
empty,
will be 5.
right? That is, these are disjoint. Okay, Therefore, here I will write, but Pi, small pi, rather it is small pi and pj. Everywhere I'll make small p, okay, for the sake of your convenience. Small p, please. Okay, pi and pj belongs to different equivalence classes. Okay, pi pj belongs to different equivalence classes and have pi related to pj. Therefore, may I say is a contradiction. Different equivalence classes. No, therefore is a contradiction, and this contradiction arises due to the assumption we have made that x is the element in the intersection. Okay, therefore may I write pi intersection pj is empty for I not equal to j, that is for different I and j. Therefore here also may I claim whatever the sets pi we have defined I equals to 0 to infinity are pairwise disjoint classes. Are pairwise disjoint sets. Is that okay? From the set P
Yes,
to
ma'am.
Pi, and then we have proved that sets Pi's are also pairwise disjoint sets. Okay, therefore now if I take any element x from closed 0 to open 1, may I say x belongs to one of the equivalence classes? If I am taking x be an element in closed 0 and open 1, then x lies in one of the equivalence classes, no? X lies in one of the equivalence classes, correct? One of the equivalence class, and hence have x is related to y for some y in P. Is the point clear to everyone? we have characterized closed 0 into open 1 into pairwise disjoint sets, right? We have found that translations are also pairwise disjoint. Therefore, if I pick any number from this interval, surely the number is going to belong to one of the equivalence class. And if it belongs to one of the equivalence class, it means that x is related to y or some y in that set P. Correct, now?
Yes,
Is there
ma'am.
any confusion with this? Suppose this is what closed 0 and open 1. Okay, and if we have made the partitions like this, say suppose these are the partitions, not exactly like this, but for the sake of understanding. Okay, now if I pick a number x somewhere, if I pick a number x somewhere in the interval, this x is going to lie in one of the equivalence class. And if x belongs to one of the equivalence class, if I denote it with P, say, then what does one can say? If x belongs to equivalence class P, means x is related to the elements y in P. Right now? X related to element y in P. And if x related to element y in P, therefore may I say x minus y is a rational number. X minus y is a rational number. Okay, now say Rx. X minus 1 is a rational number, say Ri. Now if I am saying x minus 1 is a rational number, say Ri, one can say that x belongs to Pi. Right now, because x minus y is a rational number, that is x minus y is equal to Ri. X minus y is equals to Ri. Therefore, what we were going to denote? X is belonging to the equivalence class, say Pi. Okay. Or again, for the sake of convenience, one can say x minus y is equal to Ri. The difference is a rational number Ri. Therefore, x is equals to y plus Ri. X is equals to y plus Ri. Therefore, this is x is belonging to P sum modulo 1 with Ri, because on the set P we have defined sum modulo 1, therefore this is belonging to Pi. Okay, therefore x belongs to Pi is the value we have obtained. For all x in y, for all x in closed, 0 to open 1, it implies x belongs to Pi. Try to understand me, okay? X minus y is a rational number. Say Ri we have defined. Therefore, x minus 1 is Ri. X is equals to y plus Ri. Or here one can write sum modulo 1 also. Sum modulo 1 with Ri. And what is y plus sum modulo 1 Ri? This is p sum modulo 1 with Ri. Na? X will belongs to some p with sum modulo 1 of Ri. But p sum modulo 1 with Ri, that is a translation of this p we have denoted with Pi earlier. Where it is? Yes, Pi we have denoted with p sum modulo 1 with Ri. Okay, is the point clear? Okay, now we will go to the point. Now here, this statement is essential for us. For all x in the closed 0 to open 1, x belongs to Pi. Now I am going to write this set closed 0 open 1 as union of all these Pi's. Hence, is it true? Closed 0 open 1 now can be written as union of Pi's. Because for every x is in Pi. Therefore, if I take the union of all Pi's, no doubt we were going to get closed 0 to open 1 set. Okay. Now, if P is measurable set, actually our aim is to prove that P is non-measurable set. No. Our aim is to show that P is non-measurable set. Let me assume the contradiction and let me check what will happen if P is measurable. Okay. If P is measurable set, if P is a measurable set, what about the translation? Yes?
Measurable.
Yes, it is measurable because we have proved Lebesgue measure is translation invariant. Measurable set. Reason here is Lebesgue measure is, we have proved a lemma, no? Lebesgue measure is translation invariant under sum modulo 1, na?
Yes, ma'am.
Under sum modulo 1. Right. Therefore, this, if P is measurable, Pi is measurable. If Pi is measurable, what about the countable union?
Measurable.
It is measurable. And here itself, may I write measure of P is equals to measure of Pi. Right now, measure of P is equals to measure of Pi. Therefore, countable union of measurable sets is measurable. Let us check what is the major value on both the sides. To the right, we have measurable, countable union of measurable set. To the left, we were assuming P is measurable. Okay. So let us check let us take a measure on both the sides of this statement number 1. Okay. Therefore, what is the step we were getting from 1? Taking measure on both the sides. Measure of closed 0 to open 1 is equal to, yes, on the right also I will take a measure of union Pi I equals to 0 to infinity, right? I equals to 0 to infinity. How this measure is evaluated on the right side? Is it sum? I from 0 to infinity measure of Pi, right now? Property, which property we have used? Yes. What is the property used here?
Lebesgue measure is countable additive.
Yes, Lebesgue measure is countably additive. Lebesgue measure is countably additive. Okay, and also we have written measure of pi is measure of p. Let us make it as independent of I, so that evaluation will be easy for us. If I call this as true, right? Now let us check the value. What is the possibility of the measure of p? Equal to 0, greater than 0. Okay, so let me discuss the cases. If what will happen if measure of p is 0? What is the value on the right side? If measure of p is 0, that is 0, 0, 0, 0 added infinite number of times.
0.
Yes. What is the measure on the left? You know. What is the measure value on the left side? This is an interval. And Lebesgue measure of an interval is nothing but
Length of interval.
length of the interval. What is the length of this
1.
interval? 1, no. Close the 0 to open 1. Length is 1. Now we were checking the right hand side values. If measure of p is 0, then if measure of p is 0, then what is sum of measure of p?
0.
Yes, it is 0. Okay. This is 0. That is right hand side takes a value 0. If m of p is 0, also if measure of p is something positive, then what about the sum right hand side value? We know
Greater than 0.
actually not greater than 0. Okay, greater
1.
than 0, but what is the value actually? Measure of p I will take common. Something 1 is going to left with us, not? Measure of p I have taken common, something positive. Now what's the value? Measure of p into 1, 1, 1, 1 added infinite number of times. 1, 1, 1, 1 added infinite number of times. No, I equals to 0 to infinite. How much is the value? On the right now.
Infinite.
This is infinite. Okay. That is in the first possibility. If measure of p is 0, right hand side gives us 0. If measure of p is something positive, right hand side gives you infinity. And in both the cases, this is not going to match the major value on the left hand side. Correct now? But measure of closed 0, open 1 is equals to 1. Left hand side value is 1, right hand side value once 0, once infinity. Okay. Therefore, may I say this is a contradiction. Why the contradiction arises? Because we have assumed P is measurable. Here I have written now, if P is measurable. This is an assumption actually. Contradicted assumption we were making, no? If P is measurable, we have obtained a contradiction. What is the conclusion? If I start with the wrong assumption, and if I'm getting a contradiction,
P is not measurable.
this implies P is not measurable set. This implies P is not a measurable set. Check if you have any difficulty in the proof. If you have, you can ask me. Therefore, if P is not measurable set, may I say, thus there exists a non-measurable set. One we have proved, there may exist another also. Thus, there exists a non-measurable set. In closed 0 to open 1. Okay. Now, the whole discussion is based upon sum modulo 1. Sum modulo 1 is the special sum we have defined by looking at this interval. Therefore, if an arbitrary interval is given to you, one has to define a special sum. Okay. And using the same process, one can define every interval contains a measurable set. Every interval contains not measurable, it is non-measurable set. Every interval contains a non-measurable set. Okay. Yes, students, if you have any difficulty in the proof, you can ask me, you can unmute yourself and have a discussion. Okay, what we have selected P, let me just have a look on the proof. P we have selected containing one element from each equivalence class, right? Then we have defined a translation of the set P to PIs by adding the number Ri, that is sum modulo 1 with Ri. Later we have checked out that those PIs are also pairwise disjoint classes. PIPJ belongs to different sets or different equivalence classes. Hence, the intersection must be empty. Therefore, PIs are pairwise disjoint classes. Similarly, if we take any element x in this closed zero open one, x must belongs to one of the PI. Therefore, closed zero open one interval one can write as union of all PIs. Okay. After this, we have assumed that if P is measurable, then according to Lebesgue-Méjoris translation invariant under sum modulo 1, Pi is also measurable and both the measure values are same. Then taking measure on both sides of equation number 1, we have checked out what is the measure value on the left hand side and right hand side. Measure value on the left hand side is 1 because this is an interval and the Lebesgue measure of interval is the length. But in both the possibilities, measure P0, measure P greater than 0, this gives us infinite value. That is for measure P0 it gives us 0 value. For measure P positive it gives us infinite value. Means in both the cases, measure of left hand side do not matches with the measure on the right side and this is a contradiction. Contradiction arises due to a wrong assumption that the P is a measurable set. Hence P is not measurable set. Therefore, we have proved the existence of a non-measurable set in the closed zero open one interval. This we have proved by using a special sum modulo 1. Therefore, depending on every interval, one can define a special sum and one can prove that every interval contains a non-measurable set. That's all for the proof of this theorem. If you have any difficulties, you can ask. Otherwise, we will start a next session, next unit of the syllabus. Yes, students, any difficulty with this?
No, ma'am.
Good. Now let me share another screen again. Now let us start unit number 2 of the syllabus. Unit number 1 we have completed today. This was the last theorem actually. Existence of non-measurable set in the closed zero open one interval. Okay. I will share all the unit number 1 notes to you till in the afternoon. Now we will go for the next unit, measurable functions. Up to now we have studied what is measurable set. Up to now, we have studied what is measurable set. Measurable set is the set which is giving us a property M of A is M of A intersection E added with M of A intersection E complement. Also in the last unit, we have seen what is outer measure, what is Lebesgue measure, what are the all properties carried out by both the measure. In outer, actually first as an extension of length, we have defined outer measure. But we have found that this outer measure is not going to satisfy countable additivity property. It satisfies all the rest properties, non-negativity is there, translation invariant, monotone, all the rest countable subadditive as well. But it will not satisfy countable additivity property. That's why a new kind of measure was defined by restricting the domain of an outer measure function to measurable set, collection of all measurable sets rather. Okay. Then the same outer measure is being converted to Lebesgue measure as a restriction and then it was defined a Lebesgue measure and we have checked whether Lebesgue measure is countably additive or not and we have found that Lebesgue measure is countably additive and also we have studied measurable set and now in the last session of the unit we have given the existence of a non-measurable set in every interval. Let us come to the next point of measurable sum functions. If we just read the word measurable functions, what idea comes in our mind? A function we wanted to be a measurable function. Okay, but measurability we have defined actually related to a set. Therefore, one may guess the definition of measurable function to be a function having domain to be measurable set. Having domain of the given function to be a measurable set or with some extra restrictions as well. Therefore, in order to study what are the extra restrictions so that the function becomes a measurable function, first we have to go for one proof of the preposition. Okay, let us go to the proof of the preposition first, and then we will try to understand what is a measurable function. One point I made clear: measurable function is a function with a domain as a measurable set added with some extra condition. To understand that extra condition, we need this proposition. So let me write the proposition first. In this proposition, we were going to prove the equivalence of four statements for extended real valued function. Let us start. Let f be extended real valued function. What is the meaning of extended real valued function? Yes. We know what is real valued function. Yes.
R union infinity.
Only infinity. Which infinity? Plus infinity, minus infinity?
Plus infinity.
Both actually, plus minus. You can extend to both. On the right also one can extend, on the left also one can extend, right? Therefore, here f is given to be extended real valued function whose domain is measurable. Measurable set, I write. Okay. Then prove that the following statements are equivalent. Prove that the following statements are equivalent. Look at the statements. Number one statement is for each real number alpha, the set collection X such that f of X is greater than alpha is measurable. Number two, for each real number alpha, the set X, f of X is greater equal by alpha is measurable. Number three, for each real number alpha, the set f of X is the set X such that f of X is strictly less than alpha is measurable. For each real number alpha, the set X such that f of X is less than or equals to alpha is measurable. See, what we are covering here, what we were going to prove, we were going to prove all these statements are equivalent, where f is given to be an extended real valued function whose domain is measurable set. Now we want to prove the statements are equivalent. If we look at the statements very carefully, if I start with first statement, collection of the set X such that f of X is greater than alpha. F of X is greater than alpha is measurable. What about its complement? What will be the complement of this set? F of X, collection of X such that f of X is greater than alpha. What will be the complement of this set?
F of X less than or equal to alpha.
Yes, it is less than or equals to alpha. Therefore, if I start with 1, may I say 4 will be automatically measurable, less than or equals to alpha?
Yes, ma'am.
What about reverse? If I start with 4, that is f of X less than or equals to alpha is measurable. What about its complement? X such that f X greater than alpha. If 1 implies and implied by 4 holds, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Same thing is true for 2 and 3. If I look at this 2, collection of X such that f of X is greater or equal by alpha is measurable. What about its complement?
F of X less than alpha, measurable.
Yes, less than alpha. And again, if we start with 3, 2 is measurable. Therefore, 1 implies and implied by 4, 2 implies and implied by 3 is measurable. This we have proved. But in order to prove all the 4 statements equivalent, we have to prove the equivalence in one of the statement in the 2 sets. Right now, this is one set. This is another set. Therefore, we will prove 1 implies and implied by 2. Right? Is the idea of the proof clear?
Yes,
Stepwise
ma'am.
we will go. 1 implies and implied by 4 is the first step. 2 implies and implied by 3 will be the second step. And in the third step, we will be going to prove 1 implies and implied by 2. Okay? Let us try. Let me write what is given to us. Let f be extended real valued function defined on measurable set D. Defined on measurable set D. That is domain is D. What kind of function it is? F defined from D to R union minus infinity and plus infinity. We were going to extend on both the sides, positive side and negative side as well. This is what given to us. Now we are going to prove the equivalence of these 4 statements. Let me write step number 1. What we were going to prove in step 1? 1 implies and implied by 4. Right now? For this, what I'll write simply, these 2 sets involved in 1 and 4 are complement to one another. Okay? Now, may I write collection of all x such that f of x is greater than by alpha, its complement. What is the complement? Collection of all x such that f of x is less than or equals to alpha. Right now? Okay, I have
Yes,
written
ma'am.
involved in 1 is complement of the set involved in 4. Therefore, may I say if this is measurable, this is going to be measurable, right now? And are in the reverse also. Set in 1, here I'll write 1 and 2. This is 1, this is 4. If 1 is measurable, may I say 4 is measurable. And if 4 is measurable, 1 is going to be measurable. Because these two are the complements of one another. Therefore, may I say hence, x provided f of x is greater than alpha is measurable if and only if. What if and only if? X such that f of x is less than or equals to alpha is measurable. Correct, no? Therefore, may I write directly thus 1 implies and implied by 4. Right now? 1 implies and implied by 4. Same thing we will do for 2 and 3. In step 2 I will write. Step 2. Again, now, what is the set in 2? Collection of all x such that f of x is greater equal by alpha. Its complement will be collection of all x such that f of x is strictly less than alpha. Right now, these two are complements of one another. Therefore, I will just write the same kind of statement. This is actually set involved in 2. This is actually set involved in 3. Hence, the set x provided f of x is greater or equal by alpha is measurable if and only if x such that f of x is strictly less than alpha is measurable. Is measurable. Thus, what we have obtained? 2 implies and implied by 3. Right? First, 1 implies and implied by 4. Next, 2 implies and implied by 3. Now, we were going to show 1 implies and implied by 2. But for the first case, we will show 1 implies 2, and then in the second step we will show 2 implies. What is my claim in this step? 1 implies 2. Sorry, 1, 2 I have written like this. 1 implies 2. Right now, what is one check again? F of x such that f of x is greater than alpha. Now, what is second check? X such that f of x is greater equal by alpha. Now, I will try to write the second set f of x is greater equal by alpha in terms of a set of this type, f of x greater than alpha. Let me show you how. Okay. There is some number, say alpha here. This is the line we have drawn for f of x values, right? There is some value, some alpha on this line, see. Now the job is, we were going to define f of x greater collection of set x such that f of x is greater equal by alpha. For this, what I am going to write? I will write one set x. I will write one set x such that x f of x is greater than alpha minus 1 by n. Okay, I am going to write set f of x greater equal by alpha in terms of the set f of x is strictly greater than alpha minus 1 by n. Okay. Now, if I take the first value for n equals to 1, then this is alpha minus 1. Somewhere the value is here, say. Let me write somewhere the value is here, alpha minus 1. What about for the next value, n equal to 2? Is the value somewhere
Alpha
here?
minus
Alpha minus 1 by 2, right? Next, for an arbitrary value, alpha minus 1 by n, it is somewhere here. And if I just continue like this, may I say we were going to be, or we were going nearer and nearer to alpha. As n approaches to infinity, this value is turning towards alpha. Therefore, what we will do, we will collect intersection of all such sets. Therefore, may I say it will include alpha as well. Therefore, see now what I am going to write. F of x greater equal alpha is intersection of all the sets element x such that f of x is strictly greater by alpha minus 1 by n. Check, are you getting my point or not? That is, this f of x is greater equal by alpha, we have written in terms of strictly greater by some term. Is the point understood to everyone? This is countable intersection of all the sets of this time. As we approach as n towards infinity, it will cover a point alpha also. Right? Yes, is there any difficulty? If you can ask. Now, what is the assumption we have made? 1 implies 2 we wanted to prove. Therefore, what is my assumption? F of x strictly greater than by alpha is measurable. Right? Here, let me write. We will not, or we have collection of all x such that f of x greater than alpha is measurable. Correct, na? Therefore, may I say then whether this kind of set is measurable or not? Alpha minus 1 by n is also measurable. For all n. Okay? Collection of all x such that f of x is strictly greater than by alpha is measurable is the assumption. Our aim is to prove greater equal by alpha is also measurable. Therefore, we have written this collection of x f of x is greater equal by alpha as countable intersection of collection of x such that f of x is strictly greater by alpha minus 1 by n. But now we were saying this alpha minus collection, this set is measurable. Therefore, what about countable intersection of measurable sets?
Measurable.
Measurable. Therefore, this left hand side is measurable. Okay. Now we have, here I'll call it as 1 say. We have 1 as countable intersection of measurable sets. Measurable sets. Hence, 1 is measurable. What is 1 we have defined? Let me write thus x such that f of x is greater or equal by alpha is measurable set. Measurable set. Hence what we have proved? 1 implies 2 we have proved. What is the last point remains to prove? 2 implies 1 also. Let me write step 4, 2 implies 1. What is the assumption now? Yes, what is the assumption? X such that f of x greater equal alpha is measurable is the assumption, and our aim is to prove that strictly greater than alpha is also measurable. Strictly greater than alpha is measurable. Now we will write f of x strictly greater than alpha in terms of f of x greater equal by something. F of x is greater. As of here we have written greater equal by alpha as intersection of strictly greater than by something. Now we will write, okay, now again what we were going to do, again this is my f of x line, somewhere here it is say alpha, okay. Then if I take alpha plus 1 by n, what will happen? Somewhere a number is here, na? Alpha plus 1 by n. Let us check what will happen if it is alpha plus 1 for n equal to 1, alpha plus 1 by 2 and so on, so that it will go nearer and nearer to this number. Right now, in the above step, we have reached towards alpha from the left hand side. Now we were reaching alpha from the right hand side. We were reaching alpha from the right hand side. Now can I write this collection x such that f of x is greater equal by alpha? Oh sorry, strictly greater by alpha. Strictly greater by alpha as union of collection of all x such that f of x is strictly greater than by alpha plus 1 by n, or greater equal by alpha plus 1 by n. No doubt it's a countable union. Is the point clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Very similar to the previous step. In the previous step, we have reached alpha from the left, taking the countable intersection. Now we were reaching towards alpha from the right, taking countable union. But what about this kind of set on the right? Measurable, greater equal by alpha measurable is the assumption. Therefore, what about countable union of measurable sets? Measurable. Okay. So we have, what is my assumption? X such that f of x is greater equal by alpha is measurable set is the assumption. Is a measurable set, then x such that f of x is greater equal by alpha plus 1 by n is also measurable. Is also measurable. Let me call this as 2. Now what we have in this 2? In 2 we have countable union of measurable sets. measurable sets. Hence, 2 is measurable. Don't confused with that this equation number 2 and whatever claim 2 it is. Okay, if what it is proved, then what we have proved is x such that f of x is greater or equal alpha is measurable, then we have proved x such that f of x strictly greater than by alpha is also measurable. Now from step 1 and from step 3 and 4, what is the claim? First from steps, shall I write? Combine this step 1, 2, 3, 4. What we have? 1 implies and implied by 2, 2 implies and implied by 3, 3 implies and implied by 4. Right now, initially we have proved this implication. Then we have written this, and now we have proved this, right? Hence, all statements are equivalent. If you have any difficulty, you can ask me. All statements are equivalent. Okay? Yes, any difficulty in today's lecture? If you have, you can ask. Now we'll stop for today. In the next lecture, we will see the definition of measurable function. Okay, and the definitions actually says that function is said to be a measurable function if the domain is measurable and it satisfies one of the 4 conditions. It is going to satisfy one of the 4 conditions. If it satisfies one of the 4 conditions, may I say all 4 conditions are going to be satisfied? Because just now we have proved that all these statements are equivalent, right? No? Okay, we will see the definition of measurable function preposition examples in the next lecture. Let me stop for today. If you have any difficulties, you can ask me. Yes, students. If there are no difficulties, let me stop for today. Thank you for being with me for this lecture.